Hello, welcome to Modern Papist. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Sean.
Today we're going to talk about Catholicism in America, the pro-life movement.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting part of American Catholicism history, particularly because we're still very much in it. It's still happening. And, I'm honored to be a part of it. But let's see how we've gotten to the point we are right now.
Yeah, that would be great to hear. I mean, what exactly, where do you want to start? You want to start at the 60s? Or is it?
I want to glance over just super briefly, like real early, but it'll only take a few minutes.
Okay.
Pretty much at one point, there was no abortion laws in America. They were talking like 1840s. A lot of historians have pinpointed. And that's interesting, but at the same time, the science was not concluded. It was generally accepted kind of by that time, that by the time you could feel the baby in the mother's stomach, that it was, kind of a no-go. And yeah, it was pretty much not talked about. And it was very much looked down upon in society. Like, it wasn't open the air. People were not proud of it. And eventually, they got different methods for doing it. But eventually, by 1900s, so in that kind of 60-year frame, there were laws in all 50 states pretty much not allowing it completely. Because, before this became a federal issue and the original design of America, that these issues would be dealt on a state level. And all 50 states had agreed that, this was not something that was okay. Then we go back to the late 50s. Okay. That's when, like, 59 was a lot. So maybe, late 50s, early 60s. That's when things kind of start going through the idea of the sexual revolution, and that, I'm just going to say consequence-free sex is, good, empowering, and ought to be the norm. But obviously, when a pregnancy is formed, that kind of gets in the way. And so then that kind of brought up the issue again of, okay, well, when is this thing considered a life? How does this relate to women? And, women are actually going into the workforce more, so that brings out another side of it. And so the question started being brought up again. And I guess that's where things really start. And so, you look into it and the beginnings of it. Like, what was the beginning of the pro-life movement period? Like, just taking us out of Catholicism for a second. It really did start with Catholic doctors, Catholic lawyers, and housewives specifically. And it was, it was very non-federalized, very, small pockets, regional to begin. But it was definitely there. And by 63, before 1965, the USCCB, so the Council of Catholic Bishops in America.
The National Catholic.
Yeah, the National.
I guess that's
the National
what
Catholic.
It was called. Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was called back then. So that got involved, started actually giving funding to these organizations. And there were always, some Protestants there, some Mormon, some Orthodox people, helping out. And, that's always been appreciated. It had always been seen, at least at the beginning, as a very, let's say, Catholic-centric movement, very Catholic-centered movement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Catholics made up the bulk and spearheaded most of it, but that's not to say that there weren't other participants.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's so very interesting, because I'm just going to take us out of America just briefly for a second. In Europe, that's still very much the case. If someone says, "Oh, I'm pro-life," the first question you will get is, "Oh, so you're Catholic then?"
Okay.
They're very much associated, and especially in very liberalized Western European countries, specifically Denmark. Not Denmark, sorry. Well, Denmark would be one of them, actually, but I was thinking the Netherlands specifically. So okay. Denmark, the Netherlands, I would even dare say Iceland, these countries with very loose abortion laws. It's very accessible. Being pro-life is still very much attached to being Catholic. And so that's kind of a sidebar, but I thought it was interesting. But in America, it kind of did catch on more to the mainstream religious environment eventually. I believe we were talking about this before, Ryan. Was it Nixon who was kind of the first really open, like, pro-life
Yeah, he wasn't completely pro-life because if you hear what
Yeah.
he says in Watergate, it's like
Yeah, fair enough.
about that in Water on the tapes. He was the one that first campaigned as an anti-abortion,
Mhm.
mostly pro-life person because he had exceptions, but he really wanted the Catholic vote. And from my understanding, his opponent, the Democrat George McGovern, which sounds like a made-up name. Uh, so I mean, he's a real person. You know, whatever. Was for abortion, and so this was like the first. Um, this was the first election with presidential candidates that actually spoke on the issue.
Mm.
And for me, like my background, one of my degrees is in political science, so this is something I was very interested in college um, about this whole issue. So that's why I know it. The What was it? He ended up Nixon won by a landslide, and he won most of the Catholic vote. And part of it is due because of how he was talking about abortion.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
no, that's a really excellent point. And
but
so that's kind of like its birth onto the mainstream political scene.
right, but just to clarify though, in terms
Mm.
of political, like when you look at Gallup polls and stuff, you
Yeah.
don't see mainstream Republicans. So like, you don't see Republican and Democrats in the population start to split until Reagan.
Mm.
And they split on all three of the issues. So all three of the questions for abortion. So they split on all cases, some cases, and no cases. And you can see just this divide of on every single one of those questions on Democrat and Republican lines in 1988.
That's really interesting because a lot of people point to Reagan as like the point in which evangelicalism really found became part of the bedrock of the Republican Party.
Right.
And you're like, very good for them. They kind of brought in that pro-life passion that the Catholics established early on in the pro-life movement. Yeah, so people became more aware of the issues, science, and then 1973 rolls around, and that is the day. That is Roe v. Wade. That is where it's declared a constitutional right, if you will, by the Supreme Court.
Wade.
But that was the day where it became legal in all 50 states, all at once. And a lot of pro-life activism at the time, one of their arguments was you couldn't implement abortion universally well. That the idea of America has always been that local regions have the right to make their own laws and to do what suits them. Because, many of the states at the time were still more pro-life than pro-choice, but it was kind of forced upon them at that moment. This is where the movement really built. It goes from small pockets throughout the country, non-organized. People are coming together, and it's actually getting hardcore. Shoot, the Life Rebellion, was it? Anyways, at the time, a bunch of what people would call radical groups started forming. And this is, chaining yourself to the outside of abortion clinics, mass protests. And it's very interesting. This is where tactics are really starting to play out. I know this is a big debate in the pro-life community. Stuff like, are graphic images useful? And now we have information to kind of base our opinions off that. But back then they did not. So some people tried that. Some people, once again, tried to, the stereotypical caricature of the pro-life person standing outside yelling, how dare you, you murderer? How can you do that? You should have waited till you were married, screaming these things. And of course, that's never justified. We're always called to charity. But these people had not seen the negative effects that would entail yet. So very much an experimental phase for tactics as well. And, some worked better than others. And then that's what the big thing happened around this time was the conversion, if you will, or the jumping ship of Roe from more pro-choice to pro-life, because Roe is an actual person.
Right.
When I was young, I didn't know what those words
Yeah, I was
meant.
surprised too, and then I was surprised to find out that she turned Catholic.
Yeah, specifically. Well, actually, she was originally baptized by a very, very, very intense evangelical preacher. I've seen the video of her being baptized in a pool by that pastor, but she did end up becoming Catholic, which I thought was very interesting. Because that's like the ultimate leap, right? The ultimate leap. Not only am I anti-abortion, but I'm also pro-life. I'm also follow the teachings of Humanae Vitae and, the teaching of the church in regards to contraception and just how children are a positive good, not that only that they don't deserve to die, but that they're actually a positive good.
Right.
Yeah. And so she really went all the way. And so that, was a spark. And this is also when the March for Life started getting organized. They have it on the anniversary every year in January. And it's, I believe, routinely the largest, like, actual peaceful protest, if you will. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But it's a literally peaceful protest, and it happens every year. And it's broken records and attendance for these types of things, rain or shine, and it's consistent every year. I find that interesting. That it's one thing to get a massive group of people to protest in DC peacefully. It's another thing to do it year in and year out.
Yeah, and it's been for like over 40 years, right? It's almost 50 years.
Yes.
So like, that's no joke. And you always have to. I mean, I think President Trump was really adamant about the fact that it should get recorded by the news.
Absolutely. The fact that it's so widely done, but not as widely recorded, perhaps shows bias. I'm not quite sure, but it really is. You go. Have you ever been, Ryan? I've been once.
No, I've always wanted to go, but it just never happened.
Happens. Hey, man, hopefully we'll make it. I would like to go again. I went once in high school, and I'm just going to go into anecdotal, just my experience for anyone who has not. Very interesting, Grace. So we live in the general Detroit area, both me and Ryan. And so it's a long drive, maybe a little over 10 hours.
Yeah, if you're driving.
Yeah, I was just in Richmond for a family wedding, and that was a 10-hour drive. And so that's maybe a little, so I'm just going to say about 10 hours on a bus. And so we took breaks, so maybe it ended up being 12, high school students. And I just remember it being very fun. I was hanging out with my friends. I have the pictures, like good memories. But when you looked around, I still saw how Catholic it was. So we have one of the top, I believe it's one of the top like 30 largest churches in the world, the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in DC, right? That building was so full. I remember it was like standing room in the back, standing room in the center, standing room on the side. Like there's not a part of the floor other than the part where the priests need to process that were not full. I never got a seat. We showed up like 2 hours early and couldn't get a seat. And so we were sitting in the kind of middle right. And when I mean sitting, like sitting on the ground. And shoot, one of my friends timed the procession of how many priests had come. And I believe it was almost 17 minutes of priest processing.
Wow.
It was insane. And so like Catholics coming all from the country, different rites I found. So that was my first exposure to the other rites and other Catholic churches. Like your Byzantine, there's a lot of different Ukraine Byzantine, even some like Coptic Catholics. Because I noticed they were wearing different color. They were wearing pink vestments in the middle of January. And they were wearing crowns, which is a very Eastern Catholic thing, which I thought was really cool. And I just remember during the march itself, Our Lady of Perpetual Help signs, Divine Mercy images. I did see, though, there were Protestants. I remember seeing signs for Lutheran churches who made the trick. I almost bumped into, like I tripped and almost fell on a rabbi. And he traditional had the horn, the ram's horn.
Yeah.
But like even seeing it today, like how that has not changed, how this is such a Catholic-led movement.
Sorry, I'm just trying to recap it so we get like.
No, you're fine. It's legalized in all 50 states, and the pro-life movement organizes nationally. You have Your Right for Life, which has been around pretty much since. And you start getting the kind of phenomenon of pro-life celebrities at this point, if that makes sense. Yep. You have Roe, you have an early Father Pavone, who is big, and some even in the Protestant sphere. There was an Episcopalian / Anglican cleric That was huge, and I think has recently denounced he's officially changed his mind.
Huh.
Unfortunately, and I think that's potentially because some forms of Episcopalian are moving that way entirely.
Like abortion has been talked about in terms of like Christianity, because a lot of people will think that abortion is something that's just a recent phenomenon. Like,
Yeah.
oh, we have the instruments to do abortion, we have the pills to do abortion, we have all this stuff. No, like this was talked about in the early church.
Yes.
And if you see the Didache, which is like the first cheat sheet for priests going door to door, talking
Mm.
about the gospel and certain things that they should talk about. Well, abortion's actually one of them,
Yeah.
and it's one of the what is it? It's dated around the time of around the time of Paul's writings. So
Yes.
it's very early, and even before then, the Orthodox Jews, or the Jews,
Mm.
they were against abortion too, obviously
Yes.
because of what Scripture says about knowing you in your womb, or knowing before you were formed in your womb. So it's a very consistent teaching. It's not like a political reactionary move. It's a consistent teaching throughout. So when it comes to some denominations that aren't as traditional, like you're gonna get that, and
Yeah.
that's really unfortunate because they're losing history of witness of what the gospel actually is. And it's not just, obviously it's not just what's in the Bible, it's how you act with what's been passed on to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially how you act. That's big. Where we're pro-life celebrities, and that's even branched off to nowadays. What are some now? You have Abby Johnson. She just spoke at the Republican National Convention. Was it last night? I believe.
Or the night, I don't remember, but it was very
Within the
powerful and
past
very
week.
succinct. Like it
Yeah.
was very concise in a very
Hmm.
it was knocking down all the dominoes I would want to hear in such a speech.
Yeah. And though she's drawn some controversy on a different issue, I don't want people to be complaining us referencing her. I'm talking purely about her pro-life stuff.
Yep.
Very much so. And another one I'm going to name drop is Lila Rose. She is fantastic. She's talking to mainstream, the Daily Wire people, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, all these like prominent political podcasters. She's been on their shows. I had the opportunity to meet her actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, what's that? If I haven't mentioned this before, I did a mission year in Ireland where I lived with the bishop there, and he hosted a dinner for a lot of these prominent speakers because they were having a referendum on abortion at the time. And so they flew Lila Rose out from America just to speak in the city of Waterford in Ireland. And so I got to have dinner with her and a bunch of other people and other speakers as well. But that was really cool. She was really nice, and you could tell that she was really passionate about it.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us really, it's not changed till now because of, it's still legal. There was that kind of thing that happened a few years ago with the heartbeat bills in Georgia and Alabama, I believe. That was very much interesting because it was the states trying to reassert their rights that was originally granted them in America to,
Yep.
kind of establish for themselves, which I thought was really cool. Some people didn't like that strategy. A lot of people thought it was worth a try.
That's one of the only ways you can actually get it to be overturned.
Yeah.
Because the intent is to get it to the Supreme Court to have it then overturned, because part of the justification in Roe v. Wade, and I think in Casey versus Planned Parenthood, is that the science wasn't definitive about when a human being starts. And I'm speaking as someone in expertise and I have a master's degree in biostats. It is very definitive. when it was definitive then, even it's been politicized, and that's what happens when you politicize science, is that you get errors, or you get non-consensus, or in cases of more common things, a consensus that really isn't a consensus among experts. So it's really kind of frustrating to read it and to be like, wow, that's a lie. And but yeah, the heartbeat bills are I really enjoy. It's one of the reasons actually why I don't why my family does not subscribe to Netflix anymore,
Yeah,
because of their statements. And so like every so you had these heartbeat bills, and so this is just my reaction to it as because I'm not going to spend money on some organization that promotes something I am vehemently against.
yeah,
And I am very much against abortion.
yeah. And Netflix is proving time and time again that they keep on slipping and that they support some really messed up stuff, and they're truly not reliable, unfortunately.
Right.
And I think that's something that we as a pro-life community need to assess, because I think a lot of people are they're afraid that they'll have to do in-depth research at every place they shop to make sure it's pro-life, and so then they would be able to shop anywhere.
I
But
mean,
then they'll still continue to go on, and I'm not going to say I'm totally guilt-free of this, but they'll still go on to support the most pro-choice organizations, the most open about it.
right.
Which is
So like if I mean, I'm not saying you do a mass boycott, because that is really hard to do. And even though there's there's justification for you to say use Google Chrome, or if all the other alternatives are also for abortion.
yeah,
Like, because there's just no other option. Now, in some cases, like, it's completely okay to say, no, I'm not going to. Netflix may have some like really sweet things. And, we were subscribers from it to Netflix ever since the DVD stuff. Like, they would send
really,
you DVDs. So we were there a long time. We were just like, nope. And, abortion hits me really hard. I know this is getting personal or whatever, but like, hits me really hard because me and my brother wouldn't be here if my whatever. Like in my dad's first marriage, he had his wife had an abortion,
oh wow,
and that's what led to the annulment and divorce. And then he married my mom, and then he had me and my brother. And so we wouldn't be here if someone didn't die. Now that's not to say I'm happy about that. I'm
yeah,
not happy about that. No one should be happy about the fact that they're alive because someone else died. But I do take it from a standpoint of I'm a blessing from God. My brother's a blessing from God from a bad situation.
interesting. I did not know that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Because what's it? I feel like sometimes as a pro-life community, sorry, we're getting away from like the linear timeline we were going.
Yeah. Sorry.
But yeah, it's all right, I guess. Shoot, what was I thinking? Yeah, because it's kind of seen that the pro-life position is kind of like the opinion of the facts, I guess that makes, because you always see that, like conservative reporter uses facts and logic to destroy,
Oh yeah.
liberal. And like that's true, yes. Like the science is on the side, and that's part of the history. That's what I was going to go into. Since '73, the pro-life movement has been so good about using technology, ultrasounds. Shoot, you'll even like attach speakers to the pregnant woman's stomachs and project the baby. Their sound, whatever sound a baby makes while they're in the womb. I don't know what that sounds like, but they managed to do it, which is very, very impressive. So we do have that, like the facts and logic on our sides, but that can come out as uncompassionate. And people, we do have stories of grace and redemption. I say I have a few family members actually, in both close and extended family members that are the subject of adoption. They're adopted, and knowing the situation of their biological mothers, like very often they would have been aborted. And I see these family members of mine, and they're great and they're doing great things, and I reflect on how much of loss that would have been for me personally if I knew they were never there, because America is so unique in that it's so generous, and that is they have a waiting list for adoptions. We have parents eagerly waiting for more babies to be available for adoption, and how much of a blessing those children can be on the world.
If abortion was happening, like everyone's kind of promoting it to be. Like, I mean, because it used to be. So like, here's also like another like historical aspect of it, where it used to be promoted as safe, legal, and rare.
Yeah.
Now we're at the point where we have movements that are saying shout your abortion. That's not the same thing.
Not at all.
And getting to that point and just how it's more about, it seems more and more like it's a convenience issue. And when you see people interviewed give their testimony, whether they're even if they're pro-choice, like they say, they'll come out and be like, well, I wanted to do something, I wanted to go ahead, I didn't want to be strapped down. It's like, well, that's a convenience issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a that's not a life or death issue. And people try to make it out to be as if it is life or death, because they'll look at it as, that's my liberty being taken away. But at the same time, like, that's false liberty. Liberty for liberty's sake is not good. Liberty for the good is good. Like, that technically, that used to be, no, deviating a little bit, but that used to be the philosophical understanding of liberty, was the ability to do good, the choice to do good, or the not the choice to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
That's free will. That's different. Like, free will is that. It has to be directed towards good, or everything falls apart.
Yeah. Well, it's the classic story. I believe it was our Pope St. John Paul II landing in America. Reagan greets him and says, "Your Holiness, welcome to the land of the free." And the legend himself, Pope St. John Paul II, looks at him and says, "Ah, free. But free for what?" I'm not going to attempt the Polish accent because I would do a terrible job. But that's the kind of the classical Catholic teaching. But yeah, sorry about that, guys, for that little side rants. But those are important. And know that we mean all these things and these points in love and compassion to the woman, of course, because we are also fully aware of how difficult these situations are for them. That's fair. So yeah, pretty much, I guess in summary, this history of the pro-life movement has yet to be written. We're kind of in an interesting time within the movement. We now have pro-life celebrities, in the sense that they're just famous for being pro-life speakers, which I find interesting. We are utilizing the science, and we're going gung ho, and I think we're actually securing a lot of victories. I want to end this on a hopeful note, because I don't want people saying, hopefully one day abortion will be gone in America. I want to say that day when it is gone. We have several states that only have one clinic left in the entire state, which I find incredibly impressive. And the narrative, if you will, I know people use that in the fake narrative, but the real narrative that seems to be coming out of history, excuse me if I haven't captured it quite that well yet, but it seems to be that it was legalized, and yet there's a steady stream, slow but steady, of people becoming more on fire for the cause, and we're slowly turning the hearts of the people, considering how few people actually support late-term abortions, and how that just seems to not be stopping. I think and as science progresses, the further science goes in being able to study these children inside the womb, the less of a case, the other side has. And so it's pretty much at this point, science has turned this into a purely political, because there's no scientific evidence that supports the pro-choice side anymore. So, their day is coming, I think. And I think if I had to make a prediction, that's where hopefully someday 2 other guys will be making a YouTube video on how it ended in that way. So that's my take.
Right, and I'm really excited because in Michigan here, we have a pretty firm pro-life law. So once Roe v. Wade gets overturned,
yes,
there's no clinic in Michigan.
True.
Yeah, so that's pretty hopeful. I mean, I agree with you. I think it's just a matter of when. But yeah, I think this was a good talk. I liked it.
It was very interesting.
I'd love to talk about more of the dynamics in the courts and stuff, and the ridiculous statements made by a few Supreme Court justices on the issue, but that would be a whole different thing, and it wouldn't be Catholic, because the whole point of this is that this is a Catholic nurtured and brought up thing, and especially with Roe, it's Catholicism plays a huge role in this. So if you enjoyed this and you liked our little tangents, please like and subscribe. If not, please leave a comment. We'd love to we'd love to know some suggestions because we're always open to it. We don't just talk about it in these videos. We talk about it afterwards too. So we're always open to suggestions. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next time when we talk, hopefully about my good friend, Charles Carroll.
Right. Thank you.